Hey, Dan Meyer here, and I am back once again to talk to you about data. In our ongoing series of conversations about data analytics and topics related to crunching numbers, I gave a talk to some students and faculty and some alumni and fans of American University. It's an American university called American University. I like that's so cool. But there's a program for measurement and evaluation that I speak at every once in a while. And so I recorded this Zoom call where I was speaking to about 50 participants. And in the Zoom, I talked about data narratives and really trying to focus in on what it is that people need to know to be able to make their dashboards pop. The course is called How to Elevate Your Data Dashboards with Storytelling and Annotation. So what I did is kind of gave some examples of how storytelling kind of levels up analytics. So you do basic data analysis, you put it into a dashboard, you visualize the data, you share the data. But being able to kind of storytell with it is an additional skill set. And the narratives are what you put together when you're doing stories. So making sure that each presentation, each thing that you're doing is a narrative. It's kind of like a story that you would read in a book or watch in a movie where it's got a start and a climax. It's got characters, it's got things that happen, and the audience has to walk away having some kind of emotional impact. And that's what we do. And so this recording is basically me speaking, as I mentioned, to American University students, faculty, and alumni. So go ahead and check out the first half of it. We'll drop one half now, and then there'll be another half dropping in a couple days. I want to start just kind of thinking about what is a data narrative and how we create them. So we have data all over the place, and being able to figure out how to cherry pick that data in a way that allows us to tell a narrative is really important. We've seen plenty of evidence of how it's done really well all around us. If you look at things that are very data driven, it amazes me every day how different things have become so much more successful because their ability to not just use the data, but use the data in a way to share with their audience what they're doing, why they're doing it, how they're doing it, so that it gives more credibility. And it also just gives more validity as well. So that credibility that you get having data to back up what you're talking about, and the validity that people can actually go out themselves and look at the data and kind of like make sure that they feel it's also accurate is really important. Because as we know, we live in an era where everyone's making sense of their own data. People can write their narratives that are not data driven. So it's never been more important for us to be able to understand that it's not about just putting numbers out there, that it's actually about creating data narratives. So as the organizations become more data driven, presenting data effectively is really what we'll focus on today. And really that's kind of like the why and the how people should care about what it is we're talking about. The data will help us explain to them why they should care and how they can care about what we're talking about. Data narratives bridge the gap between the raw data and action. And that's what we're looking to do, is empowering users to interpret this complex data. So I've done that throughout my career. And it's something that I feel that I am able to share with people, kind of examples of what I've done and how I've done it, give some tips on how you can do it, and really kind of just broaden our understanding of what it means to be data driven. So what I think of really is that we live in an era of information overload. We have so much data, oftentimes too much data. And how do we use the data in a way that's clear and understandable? Well, that's where data narration comes in. We're using these data narratives. It's all about taking our information, what we know, what we see, and giving it to an audience in a way that they can do something with. So I'm going to cover a lot of stuff. For some of you, this may be pretty straightforward. For some of you, you may not be quite as familiar with the idea of data visualization, data storytelling. I'm going to make an assumption that you are, but if you're not, just, I'll make sure I make it understandable for you. I'm going to make another assumption that most of you are using currently dashboards, most likely Tableau or Power BI, that you're building dashboards in what you're doing for sharing information. So about myself real quick, I worked for Wells Fargo for a long time, Wells Fargo Bank. That's where I learned analytics. I have a background in education. I was a teacher, but I ended up at Wells Fargo, spent 15 years there, getting increasingly more and more into data analytics. I was an Excel, guru, and I got hired because of that. And then I took that knowledge of how to work with numbers to be able to do a lot of really cool things with the bank. And then after 15 years with the bank, about 12, 13 years ago almost, I decided, you know what, I want to do my own thing. I want to be my own boss and do my own training and talking about analytics. So I actually set up a company in the Philippines to be able to train people to be analysts. It was kind of a unique period of time where analytics was just taking off in the Philippines. It was a little behind where a lot of Western Europe and the US are as far as analytics. And there was a need for somebody who could kind of be that expert on how do we make sense of our data. And I spent a good chunk of time just training a lot of companies here in the Philippines. I've at this point trained well over 10,000 Filipinos in how to use their data, from organizations that are huge multinationals down to small mom and pop businesses. I've taught in schools here in the Philippines. So I have a pretty rich history when it comes to working with data. So between my experience at Wells Fargo and then my experience here in the Philippines, I just get to live my dream every day and let my data geek come out. And so that's what I'll share with you today is some of my experiences from that past. So we'll talk about four things today, really. I want to do a kind of a quick overview of data storytelling because mastering data narratives is basically data storytelling, but taking it one step further. You can imagine kind of the evolution of where we started with data. Microsoft Excel is the foundation of probably where all of us learned how to first use data. And when we're using Microsoft Excel, we're making reports, we're being able to share information, we're doing some basic analysis. And then we probably got more into using some tools like Tableau or Power BI that allowed us to be able to visualize things quickly and do massive analysis of massive data sets. And now we're using artificial intelligence to be able to help us process things quicker, faster, to find things we never would have found on our own because the ability to process things and look for things that we didn't even know were there. So technology, as it's evolved, so is our ability to use that technology to tell a story. And this is what's really cool. This is why I love what I do, because I love telling stories. And when I can tell a story that's data-driven, then, like I said, when I started, it kind of adds to the credibility and the validity of what you're talking about. And it's not easy to do. One of the biggest challenges and why I keep myself so busy, biggest challenge people have is that it's hard to speak about data if you're not somebody used to speaking about it. If you are really good at analyzing data and crunching the numbers and finding the key data points, and then you have to present it. Now, it's a lot easier if you're just sharing a report. But when you have to be the one talking about the data, when you have to be the one in front of the room, whether it be on Zoom or in person, when you're the one kind of defending what your insights have told you to say, that's a skill set. And so data storytelling is kind of that evolution out of data analytics of people that not only analyze the data, but can tell the story. So as I talk about data storytelling, right? So it's an evolution of where we've been able to use data. And that evolution is leading us now to what people are starting to refer to as data narratives. And when it comes to data narratives, there's two simple things, but different things that we can use to help us get even better at driving the narrative and guiding people through our data and their widgets and visualizations that can be annotated. Simple things, but important things. And as we get more and more data, and as we're asked to tell more and more stories, it's important to keep these simple things in mind. A lot of people tend to overcomplicate stuff. And that's what we want to focus on today, really, is kind of the simple things that we can do that not only don't make it complicated, they make it simpler. And that we can help people better understand what we're trying to do with our data. So we'll talk about these four things today. So we're going to start out talking about what is data storytelling, right? So as a recap, I've done this before with this, with American University before, actually, I think a data storytelling talk. And basically, it's a practice of combining data, visuals, and narrative techniques to communicate insights. You want to be able to have a clear and compelling story that enables your audience to understand the data and make better decisions. And it's kind of cool. I think the term data storytelling is like, what, maybe 10 years old. I mean, it really wasn't a thing until maybe around 2015, 16, somewhere in there. And the idea is that, again, there's a need. started at the corporate level, but I think it's trickled out to every aspect of society that uses data to be able to think about data stories. And you think about things you see every day that are really interesting points that are given life through the data and through the narration of that data. And it's all around us. I mean, I think about some of the coolest examples. If any of you are sports fans and you go to ESPN's website during the middle of a game, like if you're watching a basketball game or a football game or whatever it may be on the app, you're going to see tons and tons of data that you can use to understand and watch the game without actually watching the game on TV, right? So you're not actually seeing the play-by-play like a traditional watch it through a camera. You're watching it through the sharing of the data, and you're becoming part of a real-time storytelling of what's happening on the field or on the court on your phone. And so the ability to be able to inform people and educate people, sometimes I think we don't appreciate how amazing these things are that we have around us. You can use data storytelling for anything, but it's commonly used for things like understanding performance, right? Having success and improvement. In the corporate world where I spend most of my time, it's people trying to figure out how to make better management decisions, how to be more informed, to be ahead of the curve, to make sure that they're mitigating risks and looking for opportunities based on having analysts crunch the numbers and present data. And I've seen this evolution, where it used to be where people only use Excel, and now everyone's pretty much using a business dashboarding tool, a business intelligence tool to be able to share that performance trends. You also see it in the health sector, and I think as an extension of that, basically any public service that's provided to show how things happen. I think back to COVID and, watching CNN or any news organization and seeing the daily counts every day. It was a simple dashboard that they were publishing that we were watching to see how things were progressing. We see dashboards all around us, and we see numbers all around us. If you follow anything in the US as far as television entertainment, you're watching commercials, Amazon uses a lot of data in their sales pitches. If you think about, how Apple is so successful, any of the tech companies are so successful, they're massively data driven. And this leads us to where it's also now being used in schools, right? So this is a great example, but for education outcomes, right? To be able to explain program effectiveness. I think this is really important to a lot of you attending today or watching this on video, is that you're trying to figure out how to explain how effective something is and why it should get continued funding, why people should care about it. And these are all things that we can do data storytelling for. And then from a customer service standpoint, identifying and fixing problems are things that a lot of companies invest heavily in. If you look at the most data-driven companies, you see the impact data's had on business all around us. I mean, 15, 20 years ago, the top 10 companies in the world were pretty much all oil and gas companies, finance companies. Now the top 10 companies in the world are all tech companies, and they're all driven off of one thing, data. And so being able to access data and do something with it really is important. So I want to do something real quick before I could keep talking forever about myself. And what I do, I want to share with you a couple of different places I go for insight. So I follow a lot of blogs. I read a lot of books, and I just wanted to share with you kind of example of one that I think is really cool. So I'll kind of sprinkle these throughout the day. This is the first one. So Brent Dykes wrote a book, Effective Data Storytelling. You can find a lot of people like Brent out there that have YouTube channels, that have written books, that do blogs or vlogs to be able to share what they see. And I just love his way he really succinctly talks about data storytelling, really in how to use narratives. And so I just wanted to kind of call out this quick visual he made. And it's a really cool infographic, I guess, that talks about how you have to build your narrative models like you do any other model. So it's almost like an extension of building a data model to explain a forecast or budget expenses or understanding the effectiveness of a program with a certain audience. You have to kind of get into the same model building mentality when it comes to doing data storytelling. So doing things like dividing it up into parts and doing a setup, increasing tension and conflict, talking about the characters involved, and then the resolution. It's like a good book or a good movie. I just saw this movie earlier with Andrew Garfield, and Florence Pugh. It was a romantic and drama. And the story had nothing to do with data. But of course, I'm sitting there watching the movie and thinking about, you know, lessons that I can take from any story about how people were brought into a narrative and see things happen to people. That's the same thing I see when I do my data storytelling, or when I see other people do data storytelling, that you're building this narrative, that you have, the same elements that we've been using to write books and make movies for centuries, are the same skills we use to do data storytelling. Another quick thing that I wanted to share with you that Brent did here is this kind of like different types of storytelling, the three-act structure, free text pyramid, hero's journey. If you have any background in creative writing, and if you have interested in studying how stories are written and developed and how they're impactful, it's a good thing to have, that understanding, that structure, because storytelling really is a lost art for a lot of people. If we think about how much time people spend consuming information on their phones, yet not really great at doing it themselves. For every, YouTube vlogger who's got millions of followers talking about his favorite this or her favorite makeup or his favorite cereal or whatever they're blogging about or vlogging about, there's, tens of thousands, if not millions of people that aren't doing that. So being in front of a room, whether it be on your camera or in front of people physically, and being able to talk about a story, it's not something most people can do. So that's why data storytelling is so cool, and why I love it so much, because it's a rare opportunity to really be able to talk to people in a way that helps use that data. So that's just a quick thing. And if you didn't capture that, we can drop the link. But the storytelling arc, Brent. I don't know him personally. I'm just kind of showing his example. There's a limitless number of experts out there that you can follow yourself. So the benefits of storytelling, I kind of covered some of this, but I'll just kind of make sure I didn't leave anything unturned. Data storytelling allows us to transform raw data into a compelling narrative. Let's again think about some examples of where we see that. What's a great data story that you can remember? Either one you've done yourself or someone's presented to you. Think about, what did you walk away with? What were you fired up about? What was it that made you go, I got to do something about this? Now, most of you are probably working with programs or projects that are pretty important, that bring out a lot of passion in people. So what ignited you to get into this? What ignited your interest, your passion? I bet it was somebody who had a pretty compelling story. And that's really kind of what I want us to focus on, is how do we take those moments and use them ourselves? So one thing to think of is that we don't always do data storytelling. We're not always going to do information where we're sitting there trying to influence people, enable behaviors, trying to get people to take action, trying to empower them or educate them. Sometimes we're just going to share information, simple reporting. But when simple reporting is not good enough, when we need to be able to really drive home our message, that's when we get into data storytelling mode. We want to make sure that our data stories improve clarity, increase engagement, support decision-making, enhance retention, right? So those are kind of the things we're looking to do. When those things are so important, we've got to be able to tell a story around it. What was it that got you into your field? And when you think about it, was it something that was data-driven? Maybe you hadn't thought of it at the time, but think about it now. What are those numbers that took you down the path that you're on now? I think about that all the time for myself. I think about the fact that I loved working for Wells Fargo, even though it's not the best company in the world. Every company's got pros and cons. They're a very data-driven company. At least back in the day when I worked there, it was very important that they look at the numbers to make good decisions. And then I think about my career doing consulting and training here in the Philippines. I've seen a lot of positive impact. I've seen a lot of people level up, both personally, professionally, and in their business, because they've gotten better at using data to be able to drive decision making. So the role of widgets and annotations, kind of the meat of what we'll talk about today. It is storytelling. It all has a bunch of technical aspects to it. And I would love to be able to walk you through, like pull up Tableau and walk through, this is how you do this, and this is how you do this. But I can't do that today. We don't have enough time. Plus, not all of us are using Tableau. Some of us use Power BI. Some of us use, applications that are internally developed. Some of us aren't using anything except Excel, but whatever you're using, you're probably familiar in a general sense with these business dashboarding tools. And widgets and annotations are tech that are embedded in most tools, whether it be like Tableau, Power BI, Excel, whatever you're using. And they allow us to do things like provide more insight, to help things be more understandable, easily understandable. Annotations are simply labels or highlights on charts that emphasize key points, but using them effectively is not something that's easy to do. One of the biggest challenges I've come across when people are trying to figure out how to really get better at storytelling and using data narratives is when to highlight what. And there's no right or wrong answer. You just have to get good at it. You have to develop your own sense of intuition through trial and error. But there are some tech things that you can do. If you're familiar with Tableau or Power BI, I don't want to bore you to death, but I also don't want to, walk without giving you some example of what these things do for those of you that aren't too familiar with them, because you haven't used them or you just haven't seen how to use them for storytelling. So let's just watch a quick video real quick. Okay, so that was just a quick one on Tableau. And basically, again, if you're familiar with it, it's got embedded storytelling tools. One of the cool things Tableau launched, I don't know, 6, 7 years ago, was the ability to do stories. And each release of Tableau gets better and better at giving you these tools that allow you to kind of quickly make stories. The idea being that Tableau, like most of us, has figured out that it's not about just sharing data, doing reporting in a dashboard. It's about putting a context around that data. And the tools there are pretty cool. Just because some of you probably use Power BI instead of Tableau, or you find that Power BI is better or different, we'll watch a quick one for Power BI. The reason I showed those two examples really is to help you get a sense of how they work. The examples I showed you, they're just people using Tableau or Power BI to be able to do storytelling, right? And storytelling with annotations and using the different abilities to do ways to call out data. And that's really what storytelling and narratives is all about, is guiding people through the journey. So when you think about storytelling, think about how you want the flow of the story to go. Again, think about a movie or a book, and how you have this progression of somebody, your audience, going through their understanding information. I think really powerful stories come from when we've structured it, like the first blogger I showed you, Brent, what he talks about how you basically plan your data story the way you would plan a screenplay or a manuscript, is that you kind of write out what you want to have happen. Now you can jot down notes, you can think about it, eventually it becomes second nature. But we tend to do the opposite. We tend to have our data and we start making visuals to explain the data. And it makes sense to us because we're the one building it. We're the one that knows our data. But then when we put it out there, is it everything kind of building off each other? Like if you have, for example, you have information on a program that you've been working with, say, just make one up, like you're bringing clean water to an area and you want to make sure that people understand the importance of the funding that's going into the project to clean the water and get the water to people, how it's increasing people's health, how that is increasing people's education, how this whole thing happens. You think about the visuals that will show that story, like, maybe you have a simple pie chart to show the people that didn't have clean water when you first started, and then an updated pie chart to show the number of people that had clean water since the project has been fully funded and up and running. You talk about, maybe you have a bullet pointer or drop down list of things that pop up that show the benefits of having access to clean water. Whatever it may be, you're thinking of that story and you're kind of like thinking of the visualization. So if you're making a dashboard, we tend to make dashboards where we just have these cool visuals and share them. And then we kind of expect our audience to make sense of them, to jump from one visual to another, and it's going to make sense to them. But does it? That's really the big thing you want to start asking yourself, is the way I'm sharing my information, is it actually a narrative? Is it actually being used for a story? And these widgets and annotations can help along the way. They're like bookmarks. They can be used like ways to kind of add information, like a behind the scenes, or, like if you're watching a movie with like pop-up commentary. It's that kind of stuff, right? So you're trying to give people hints. If you're, reading War and Peace and you have no understanding of the Russian Revolution or War of 1812, I forget, oh my God, Russian Revolution, right? I haven't read the book in so long. But the point being, if you don't have that context of Russian history, maybe War and Peace won't be as powerful for you. So to be able to understand more, maybe you put the book down or pause the movie and you Google it real quick. Well, what happened? Why did they get into this revolution? What was the whole backstory? That's what your annotations in you do. That's why you use these widgets to kind of pop up and give people that information. So that's Tableau and Power BI. And I need to kind of speed things up a little bit because I'm sharing a lot more with you than I want to get more to the nuts and bolts of it. So what are narrative widgets? And this is the first one. A data narrative in Tableau or Power BI is a structured story told through visualizations, right? We covered that. Charts, graphs, we get all that, right? But combining these visuals with context, annotations, tooltips, pop-ups, data narratives and platform help viewers move from observing trends to understand their significance, right? From disobserving trends to understanding the significance of those trends. This is when we want to make sure that we're really kind of like doing more to add context, because depending on how savvy our audience is, depending on how much our audience knows about what we're doing, the easier it will be for them to be able to understand things, to see read between the lines. I think about when you're given a presentation to peers that know exactly what you're doing and are doing like things, to the general public, which has no idea the nuts and bolts of what you do. They just want to know what the outcomes. And the more broad your audience is, the more you have to give them these type of narrative widgets to help them make sure that they make sense. You do these things like the annotations and these tooltips, these pop-ups that help them build them. Now, I thought about trying to show you a couple examples, but then again, I think the best thing for you to do is if you're trying to figure out how to get better at this, whatever application you're using, just go to YouTube and find an expert. There's nothing that you need to be able to do on a tool like Power BI or tablet. Somebody else hasn't already figured out how to do it well and made a video about it. So figure out what it is that you want to level up with when it comes to using narrative widgets and do some research. There's a lot of cool ways to do it. And these tools are always getting better, right? So I showed you a couple of examples of videos that were a little bit on the older side. I need to refresh them because Tableau and Power BI keep dropping, new versions on a regular basis. So anyway, my point is make sure that you are thinking about how to guide your audience, and the more general the audience, the more guiding they need to understand the backstory, to understand the context. You can create effective narratives using widgets to do things like contextual information, interactive guidance, enhance user experience. This is what you're trying to do. So think about what you're working on right now and ask yourself, so when I present this, is everyone in the audience for my information, the consumers of my research and analysis, are they going to get it? And if there's a thought maybe some people won't get it easily, then figure out how to use one of these widgets to help them along, to give them that crutch, to give them that guide, to give them that ability to kind of just get there quicker. Because one thing that you've probably experienced, and I talk a lot about, is how we tend to over-inform people, and we create cognitive dissonance in their head. We give them too much, and we don't allow them to consume and understand it before we add something else on top of it. So being able to provide this context is kind of the key to creating these effective widgets. Some examples I mentioned before, there's tooltips, pop-ups, scenario selectors, introductory guides. I have a quick video. I'm going to show you real quick in Tableau how to do a pop-up. That's an example of just how to do a pop-up in Tableau, right? So the ability to kind of like to hover over one thing and pop up something else. These are just the simple widgets that are out there. And again, Palmer Analytics is a guy I just follow on YouTube. And there's thousands of people like that. So if you're one of the people like me, when you see something like that, you just want to go play with it. Well, that's how I do it, right? So I get an idea or a question, I can't figure it out myself. I go find an expert, I watch them, and then I usually am able to figure it out. Sometimes I even connect with them, reach out to them, and follow them. I'll give you an example later on of my favorite person to follow. But that's the idea, right? So you're creating narratives using the data, and you're using these widgets to be able to explore scenarios, provide more information to kind of give people more context with your dashboards. All right, cool. So that's the first half, right? So I had to break this up into two pieces. It's a lot of information, a lot of things that we embedded and want people to check out. So you have a chance now to go do that before we drop the second half of this video. Or those of you that are watching it consecutively, then obviously you can watch one after the other and get a lot of value. So if you haven't already done so though, please subscribe to our channel. And if you have, thank you very much. I love talking about data. As you can see from the topic we were covering here with American University's faculty, alumni, and students, I'm just a big data geek, and I love talking about how to take data and turn it into stories using narratives. So hopefully that helped. I'll be back again soon with more, so look out for part 2, and make sure that you follow us to see what we're doing when it comes to the latest things about data. All right, take care, have a great day.